So we have Kiori, John, Dean, John as well, John F and John M.
Hi, everyone.
Hey, John, how's it going?
Oh, excellent. After work. Joining you. My God, what else do you need?
What else do you need? A good stiff drink.
Yeah, I'm having that too.
Actually, Will, I'll be honest, I'm about to go and have a stiff drink. I've just been on a conference all day and I'm dressed like this because I keynoted it. So awesome. My brain is sort of somewhere else.
That's fine. No worries.
But I wouldn't
just relax.
I'll go and get a scotch.
Absolutely. Make one for me as well.
What's your favorite?
I like Lafroy. I'm a smoky.
Oh, so you're a PT.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I think I've got some. So, all right, I will do that.
A glass of red wine.
Red wine for you, John.
Yeah.
I think with Scotch, you've got to kind of sit there and just kind of sip it over a long time. Whereas wine, that's like a nice comfort drink. You can just, have a couple of glasses of wine. You can't have a couple of glasses of Scotch, not unless it's the weekend. We'll just give people a few minutes to come in. It's pretty early, just on 6.
How good is that?
That looks good. I've just got my cup of tea. There you go. Kiori's got one too, cup of tea.
Yes, cup of tea. Herb tea.
Herb tea, the hard stuff.
Hi, Will, and how's everyone?
I'm good, thanks. Very well. Busy at the moment.
Yeah, pretty busy by the look of it.
Absolutely. It always happens, end of the year. Come October, November, December, people just tend to reach out. It's not huge jobs, but just enough to keep going. So that's good.
Yeah, that's good.
How about yourself? Are you busy just now?
No, I'm looking for a job actually.
Oh, you're looking for a job. Cool.
Yeah, I finished the TAFE diploma in library and information services last year. But then because of this COVID situation, all the libraries are closed. So bad timing, really.
Yeah, that sucks. It really does.
Oh, well, what can you do?
You just have to live with it. Yeah.
Yep.
They should be starting to reopen now, though.
Yep. I see more and more job ads coming out. So fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed that some people, might have left that particular area.
Yep.
And done something else.
That's the plan.
Welcome, everyone. We haven't started yet, so in you come. Cam up if you like. So we've got Ramon, Brett, Dean, Eugene, John F, John M, Kiori, and Stephen. Cool. So guys, I'm really sorry for rescheduling it from last Monday. I just had so much on. In fact, what I'm going to be presenting tonight is actually half of the normal WordPress security presentation that I give. So I've cut it down quite a bit because I thought it was a little bit too long, but this is still a long one. Okay, a couple more minutes and then we'll just get started. Oh, someone's beeping somewhere.
must be in a busy area.
Okay, I think we'll just get started. Other people can join in. It's being recorded as well, which is good. Let me just actually see if I can record this on YouTube or Facebook. Which one shall I do? Facebook. Onto a group. I get confused. I use so many different tools. Well, just two really. But I usually normally use StreamYard for my lunchtime ones and Zoom for the evening ones. So everything's in a slightly different place. There we go. We're live on Facebook. Hurrah. Okay, guys, thank you for joining me. Again, just apologies for having to reschedule it at last minute. So this is the WordPress Sydney meetup, the evening one. Hopefully we'll get back to physical meetups, fingers crossed, next year. In talks with one of the venues at the moment, the Microsoft Reactor, and they're hoping to try and get back January or February next year, which will be fantastic. Does anyone want to say hello, introduce yourselves? I'll go first. So I'm Will, so I'm obviously one of the organizers for this. I've been working with WordPress since about 2008. So at the moment, I currently specialize in integrating WordPress with other systems. So through Zapier or through API, so basically hooking WordPress into the corporate environment and making it run more efficiently, making data flow through WordPress into other things and pumping information into WordPress. But I do like all aspects of WordPress. I like the blogging aspect. I like the security aspect. I like development, a little bit of design as well. I dabble a little bit in design, but not too much. So that's me. Anyone else, if they want to do a little introduction, say who you are, what you do, what your interest in WordPress is, you can do that now. I'll give people a few minutes. Just unmute yourself and go for it.
Hello, Will. I'm John. I'm having a Lefroy. And I run a WordPress site. Actually, I probably used to run 3 maybe, but I run one at the moment. So my interest is more from the point of view of being the high technical user. And I guess I dabble, and I'm a technologist.
Cool. I am severely jealous of your Lefroy.
Barcelona. There. Go ahead.
Who was that? Was that Ramon?
All right, I'll go.
Oh, Eugene. Hello, Eugene.
Hey, no, Will. I used to be a web developer. I used to be pretty heavily involved with this group, actually.
Yeah.
I was organizing the Parramatta, helping organize the Parramatta meeting. Stopped being a developer, but I'm starting a business, and I just want to do my own website, so I'm getting back in touch.
Awesome. Good to have you back, Eugene.
Cheers.
Anyone else want to do a quick hello, quick introduction? You don't have to.
I'm John Pfizer. I work for New South Wales Health. I usually develop in C# and various other tools. WordPress is something I was made to do. Basically, a couple of projects I needed to do, and I wanted it in WordPress. So I started dabbling, and I'm still dabbling.
Still dabbling.
Marking iron with that. So I'm not a professional WordPress developer or anything like it, but I'm getting there.
Oh, great to. Thanks for the introduction, John. I don't know how you define professional developer in a way. I still dabble. There's still lots to learn.
My primary tool is not WordPress. It's only a couple projects.
Well, glad to have you on board, John. Okay, guys, I'll just share my screen if nobody else wants to jump in. Let me see, share screen. This one. There we go. Awesome. A WordPress security. So I've not done one of these talks for a good couple of years now. Most of it's still relevant. I've updated a few slides, removed quite a lot actually. I removed quite a lot of the advanced stuff. I might do a more advanced WordPress security talk later on, but I just wanted to kind of focus on the core of security again, because I thought the talk was a little bit too long. It's because I kept adding more and more stuff to it. So there we go. So just a reminder to say subscribe on social channels if you're there. If you haven't done that already, and say hi on whichever channel. I can't remember all the channels that I broadcast on, but there we go. A quick agenda, basically like a welcome and updates, and then the main presentation tonight. But I really want to say hi to our sponsors as well. So our sponsors, although they're not physically with us, you know, they still help us in the background. They still help us with things. They're heavily into the community. They're always updating content. They're always on Slack as well, helping people out. So we give thanks to Kinetics, to WP Engine, to Plesk, WordPress community support, and at Microsoft as well. So hopefully once we get back to the physical meetups, we'll get those guys back in person, get some pizzas and some drinks and all the good stuff like that. I am looking for some people to help organize as well. So if you've got some spare time, if you're looking to get into organizing or just kind of help out, it's not a huge job. I'll send a form to everyone there. But if you're interested, you can fill out a form and I can get in touch with you. I'd really like to build up a team of 2 or 3 people. It'd be good going into 2022. Now, here's where I normally do WordPress news. Now, there's 2 reasons. There's tumbleweed here. One is I kind of run out of time. But the second reason and most important reason is there hasn't been an awful lot of WordPress news in October. So I normally subscribe to the WP Mail issue. It comes out in every Friday, and it's usually got a lot of good stuff. There's also an email that comes out from Post Status as well with lots of stuff. And I was looking through all that today, and I'm thinking, look, there's really not a lot of happening in the WordPress world at the moment. So we'll just maybe wait until next month and see if anything juicy happens next month. So some tumbleweeds for news this month. Again, you're welcome to ask anything in the comments. I've got the little chat window open just now. Just drop anything in there and I'll circle through it and try my best to answer some of those questions for you. And again, all the links for tonight, they'll be available on the meetup page and on YouTube and on Facebook. I'll put them as comments underneath. So you'll get all the links in this talk. You don't have to wait until, you don't have to write them down or anything like that. So let's jump into it. I want to introduce my friend, Sun Tzu. I always start this talk with Sun Tzu. He was a Chinese general, a military strategist, and a philosopher as well. He was born around about 512 BC. Now, he's really famous for authoring a book called The Art of War. If you haven't read it, I really suggest that you go and read it. It's a really, really good, interesting read. And even though it was written in 512 BC, it's utterly relevant today and how you strategize and think about things, especially in the security realm as well. So I'm going to pull out some favorite quotes of mine. Here is one. So Sun Tzu says, victorious warriors win first and then go on to war, while defeated warriors go to war first and seek to win. So what that means nowadays is basically don't wait until your site gets hacked first. Lock it down today and get ready to defend it at all costs. Here's another quote. To know your enemy, you must become your enemy. Now, how is that relevant today? Well, you have to learn how hackers are going to try and get into your site. You need to know all the different ways that people are trying to attack your website, just so you can prepare that and you can preemptively fix all those issues and be ready for what is to come as well. So very relevant. You've got to know your enemy. You've got to know where your WordPress security is lacking, know how hackers are trying to get into your WordPress website, so you can put patches in place, so it's not getting hacked all the time. Here's my favorite quote. Even the finest sword plunged into salt water will eventually rust. How is that relevant today? Well, just because your site is secure today, it doesn't mean that it can't get hacked tomorrow, next month, or next year. So a lot of people think that WordPress security is just installing a WordPress plugin and then leave it to do its job. but that's not necessarily the case. You've really got to review all your plugins, make sure that they're being maintained, they're up to date, update your themes regularly as well, apply WordPress core updates. So security is not just like a one thing, it's secure and that's it. It's like an ongoing practice as well. This is one of my favorite slides because it's big and bold. So the worst type of attack to your website is the one that is unknown. And that's called a zero-day bug. So zero-day bugs are something that somebody has found, a loophole, and nobody else knows about. There's actually been quite a few zero-day bugs in the Chrome browser. So Google's Chrome browser over the last month or so. You might have seen that in some of the news coming up to say urgently patch your Chrome browser. So there's been a lot of those. And it happens with WordPress. And with the WordPress core often, but more recently with plugins as well. So the WordPress core, while it does get problems, they're usually pretty quick to patch that. It's the plugins and the themes that are usually kind of the leaky boat area of WordPress. And with thousands of botnets out there in the internet, you really have no idea who's attacking you or why, but there's a lot of them out there. And because of WordPress's popularity, it now runs about a third of all the top websites in the internet, and it's got a large target on its back. So it's more likely, to come under attack from like botnets. So people who are looking for WordPress websites and trying to probe all those different known weaknesses. So a lot of talk about security. So security is what I call cyclic. It's a round robin thing. So there's always a current threat. And the worst type of threats are those that you don't know about. So we're talking about those zero-day bugs. So you really have to understand your weaknesses, build a solid defense, and have a good plan of attack. So you need to be prepared. This is what this presentation is kind of all about. Because once you're prepared, as we said, WordPress security is like a round robin thing because there's always a current threat. So it goes all the way back to the top because there's a zero-day bug, there's another threat, so you've got to know about it, prepare, understand. So it's a round robin, it's a cyclic type of thing. Now, I love this. So we just want to mention that everything is hackable, and the best we can do is make the site less attractive to others to hack. This is it going to play? I thought I had a video on this. Maybe it's the next one. This is a real advert from South Africa, and it's about a system that they installed in cars, and it's to stop carjacking. This is going back quite a few years ago, but the idea was that you'd stop at the traffic lights, people would come and like carjack your car. So some company thought this was a brilliant idea to install a flamethrower in the car, and they had like signs on the side so you could see that this flamethrower was installed for this. But really like the kind of key takeaway is, would you really steal that car? Probably not. And the whole idea is
that legal?
Oh, I have no idea. This is going back.
South Africa probably would be legal.
I would think I'd err on the side of probably legal. But the whole kind of meaning of this is, you're basically making this car less attractive. People are going to know that this is the car that's got flamethrowers. They're not going to approach it, and it's less desirable to hack to try and get into. And this is what we're trying to do with our website. We're trying to harden its defenses and make it less attractive for the hackers to get into. This book is fantastic. It's called The Art of Deception, and it really focuses on the most vulnerable part of your website, and that is you. So you should be aware of something called social engineering, and that's when bad actors or hackers, they try and manipulate you or your situation to give them access to your systems. So this book is fantastic, The Art of War. It is written by this guy here. He's called Kevin Mitnick, and he was on the FBI's most wanted list in 1992. He basically used social engineering to gain access to multiple US governments and their computer systems. And the book itself is a description of the techniques he used to breach all those classified systems just using social engineering. So he didn't have like a botnet out there. He didn't sit there and try and guess people's passwords. He actually looked into the people and used information a bit on their life, what they were doing, and tried to manipulate to get access to the system. A good example in there is he would learn all the lingo for a particular department that he was trying to hack into, and then he'd call as a support person. And because he knew all the jargon, all the TLAs and all the different types, people would just assume that he knew exactly what he was talking about and he was an official. And because he had that authority, because he had that understanding, and they just give him the information. He'd call up and say he was IT department, and he's looking for access to the AS300, blah 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 blah. And because he knew all that stuff, people would say, "Oh well, you must know what you are. You must be who you are," and they just gave him all the information. So a really interesting book. But again, the whole kind of key message of that is like the biggest weakness in the whole security cycle is you yourself. And that's true with WordPress, because you hold your username and password, close to your heart. If you give those away, then people will be able to get in. Okay, so let's jump into some of the security hacks that we can do. The first one is for new WordPress installations. And this is a relatively new type of hack. But basically, when you're setting WordPress up, don't leave the WordPress website in setup mode. So what we mean by that is when you've got your blank web hosting, you've installed WordPress, whether that's manually with FTP or whether it's using one of the little cPanel or Ples installation scripts, don't leave it at the setup page. Okay, when it's asking to enter your admin details and email and stuff like that. Because there's bot scripts out there, so there's all these bots out there that are looking for this particular type of file that's normally removed after the installation with WordPress. If they find a particular file, then they probe the form and they can actually fill out automatically the setup form, point it to another database. It could be their database server, and now they have control of a WordPress website. So when you're installing WordPress new, install it and then go through the setup process, put your admin and username and password in, go through the setup process and leave it there. Don't just leave the setup script there and not running, because people will try and install WordPress on their own database systems and then use it for whatever they want. So this is called the WP setup attack. I'll copy a little link in here. You can read up a little bit more about that. So that was a few years back, but it's still relevant just now. And something similar for SSLs as well. So just beware when you're ordering a new SSL certificate or you're setting one up for a brand new WordPress website. Now, hackers, they monitor the SSL certificate transparency report, which vendors give access to, allow public access to, and they poll this script like every 30 minutes. And if they find a new certificate, then they can then look for the previous attack for this one and see if there's a WordPress setup on there, and then just go ahead with their own setup. So just something to be aware, if you're purchasing SSLs or using the Let's Encrypt one, then make sure you issue your SSL and then go straight into the WordPress setup, install your installation, and then you can leave it at that. I'll copy a link for that one as well. So these are kind of newish types of attacks, things you might not have thought about when you're setting up your WordPress install. But again, hackers are very clever. They're always looking for different ways to try and take over your WordPress website. So again, some more security fundamentals, usernames and passwords. So when you think about usernames and passwords, remember that it's not just WordPress that you need to secure. So your WordPress website is built on an entire stack of systems. So you can think about cPanel. You need to log into your web hosting account, so cPanel or Plesk. Email. Some people might run the email through run your email through the hosting account as well. Things like FTP. You've normally got like an FTP service set up so that so that you can move all your files up to your hosting account. So that's got username and password. SSH, which is a secure shell, which is like a command line version to get in. MySQL as well, so that requires a username and password. And then finally, WordPress sitting on top of the stack. So when you're thinking about security, think about that whole bundle, that whole stack, and make sure that you've got secure usernames and passwords for all of those going all the way through. So thinking about usernames and passwords, of course, we want to avoid typical admin usernames. So things like admin or administrator, root manager, debug, user, system, default, netman, super user, guest, backup, sysadmin, all those types of usernames that people will commonly use for an administrator. Just try and avoid them as much as possible, but especially avoid using admin. And I know it's an old hack, but people still use this as a username. So in the past, when you were installing WordPress using cPanel or Ples scripts, in the olden days, it went through the whole one-click install, and it would use this user called admin and then a random password to install WordPress. So nowadays, when you're having a look, if you've got a security plugin installed, if you come back to it and have a look in the log, you'll probably see hundreds or thousands of attempts to try and guess a user called admin. And that's why it goes back to these one-click setup scripts, which thankfully, most of those are gone now. So they will ask you for a username. You've got to put in a new username. And a lot of these scripts actually don't allow you to put in admin anymore. But it's still worthwhile mentioning for those. So obviously, if hackers already know your username, then they've got 50% the way through that security barrier. So avoid common administrator type usernames. So now we're on passwords. So here's a little tip for passwords. Now, don't replace letters with numbers or symbols. This is a really popular way for people to remember the passwords. It's a really popular, what they call obfuscation method. So the example here is the word butterfly, and then you replace the B with an 8, you're replacing the E with a 3. For those, you can maybe replace the L with an I or a number 1. So you're basically replacing letters or numbers with their other opposite similarity. Sorry, try to get that one out. So the B is replaced with an X. It kind of looks a bit like a B. E is replaced with 3 because it kind of looks like a 3 as well. And it's easier for people to remember. But this simple character substitution is weak. It no longer works, and it only takes a day to crack that type of password. And there's a good article about that. I'll post that in the chat there for that. So if you are using like number or letter substitution, just beware, because that doesn't work anymore. Computers are more powerful these days, and they can crack that kind of, pretty much instantly. So that's a weak type of password. Similarly, you want to avoid things like personal or social information. So things like your name or memorable dates, like maybe your date of birth or your marriage date. You want to avoid things like that to use directly in your password. Avoid things like your favorite footy club, your car registration, or your house number as well. Now, I know a lot of people use these things because I do a lot of website audits, and I always tell people not to send me their password, but a lot of people do. And one of the most common ones is the football club, with probably their major win year on that. So example there of bad passwords. So got Bob 1976, so that's his first name with his date of birth. Got Swans 2017. I'm not a footy fan, so I have no idea if that date is relevant. That could be like the big cup win for that. And then there's CU55UP, which could be a registration information. All that sort of stuff, that's going back to this book called The Art of Social Engineering. It's all social engineering. It's all information that people can find out about yourself and then put together and guess if they really want to get access to your systems for those. Let me just copy another link here. And again, all these links will be available afterwards. This is a really good article, and it explores about more the psychological reasons that go through your head when you're making a password. There's kind of a balance between something being easy to remember and then something that's being difficult for hackers to, I guess, as well. Yeah, Dowie's just put in the chat password. That's a bad password, Dowie. So here's a couple of methods to create some strong passwords. Method 1 is to use a random 16, at least 16 characters. containing things like uppercase letters, lowercase letters, digits, and punctuation symbols. Now, this is a really, really good because it's random characters. There's no way, it's not linked to your social information at all. It's really difficult for you to remember, which also means it's really difficult for a hacker to guess as well. But the second method as well is just as strong. It's been scientifically proven to be just as strong. So what we do here is we use 4 random capitalized words stringed together. So here we've got the words correct, horse, battery, and staple. And we've put them all together in one big password. And that has been mathematically, scientifically proven to be just as complex, just as strong as the above method where you're just creating random characters as well. So random words versus random characters. So the idea about the random words is that it's kind of easier for you to remember. So if you're not into using thing like a password manager, then just creating 4 random words, it can be a lot easier for your brain to remember that than obviously a list of just random characters as they are, and just as strong as well. So that's a great tip, and that's something that I use all the time. So I look after a client who, well, basically their WordPress website has 23,000 users, and they're always getting maybe like 20 password requests every month. And what they used to do was just create a random set of characters and then send them out. But then they get some people who maybe mistype an L for a 1, or a 1 for an L, or an O for a 0. So what I said to them is just create 4 random words, choose them at random, send them out, and that's reduced the number of support requests dramatically, because people can remember 4 random words, but they have difficulty in remembering all those random characters, and they get a bit confused between I's and 1s and L's and 0s. So there's a good tip for you. Of course, remembering all these passwords, and really ideally you should have a different password for every system that you have. So remembering them all is really, really difficult. So you might want to consider using something called a password service. And there's kind of really 2 top ones, I think, out there. One is called LastPass, and that's the image from LastPass there. And there's another one called 1Password. And I'm always being asked, which one's better. Now, they're both pretty equal. But LastPass, they've made some changes recently to the free version. I think they limit the number of devices that you can access your passwords on. So that's kind of been a little bit of a negative for the user base. But apart from that, they both are kind of fairly equal in what they offer and the security as well. Now, the LastPass, their site's been hacked a few times, but nobody has ever managed to get access to the secure data that they hold. So with LastPass, it's a local 256-bit encryption. So it downloads all your encrypted stuff onto your local computer, and then your local computer decrypts it and then gives you access to the passwords for those. So everything that's stored up in the cloud is all like super encrypted for that. So even if somebody does get access to that, if they don't have your local token, then they can't get access to it. It's all just scrambled for those. And of course, LastPass and 1Password comes with 2-factor authentication, and I'll chat about that at the very end. But it basically means you have another level of security, rather than just your username and password. It's another code that prevents people from getting into that. Okay, usernames and passwords. So you might want to consider forcing users to have a strong password. So if you've got a WooCommerce, e-commerce website, maybe a membership website, an online learning website, then that's another point. If you're allowing people to register an account on your WordPress website, that's another vector, another way that hackers can get in. So there's no point securing your own password if you're allowing users to register with really, really plain passwords, easy to guess passwords. So this one here is in WordFence, I believe. Yes, it is. So there's a few checkboxes in there. And so I use WordFence for my security for my own websites and my client websites. And there's some options down here in the additional options. So you can click on that, and it forces other people when they're registering with WordPress to use a complex or strong password. And it just kind of gives it more flexibility, because I know WordPress itself has like a password meter. So when you're typing your password and register it, it'll tell you if it's poor or weak or really, really good, but it doesn't enforce it. It doesn't tell you can't use a poor password. It just tells you that password is kind of poor. So this one here forces people to make a strong password. I think that's really useful to have if you're allowing people to register on your website. This one's really cool. It's a plugin called WP Bouncer. And again, I'll copy the link in the chat for there. So what I've tended to find a lot in the WordPress world when doing WordPress reviews, audits, or just working with clients is that you're going to get somebody who shares their login account with someone else. So it could be a PA, it could be a virtual assistant for those, it could be some people that are just editing content. Rather than create a new login for that person, then they'll just say, oh, look, here's my login details. Now, sharing your login details is never a good idea because you lose control over the security aspects for that. So this little plugin here, WP Bouncer. So if you do have lots of people that are logging in, that have got an account on your WordPress website, maybe editors or authors or things like that. And this little plugin here, it prevents them from logging in on multiple devices with the same username and password. So essentially, it stores a little cookie on the machine with the IP address. It also stores in the table in the database. So if somebody's logged in as say Bob, username Bob on my computer, someone then tries to log in on an iPad with username Bob with the same username, then you've got some options as to how you want to deal with that. So you can display a message to the second person to say, no, sorry, that's not allowed. Somebody's already logged in. Or you can actually set it to switch over as well. So rather than log you out on the first device and log in on the second device there. It just kind of attempts to stop people from sharing those login details.
Is that when they try to log in concurrently, or if I log in now and 2 hours later I try to log in on iPad or wherever, or is that just concurrently? If I log in and somebody tries to log in straight away as well?
Yep. So there's a setting, so you can choose the time between logins for those. So you can set it to maybe 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or over, I think, 30 minutes or something like that. So yeah. Another one here is to protect your session safety. So this is talking about logins. So when you create WordPress, you probably haven't ever looked in the configuration file, but WordPress has a configuration file called wp-config.php, and that sits in the root of the WordPress install. And when you normally install WordPress, it creates a little block in the config file that looks like that. And these are called salt keys. And WordPress uses these keys. So when you log in, WordPress will store. I think I'm getting feedback from someone. I'll just mute you there. So when you log into WordPress, WordPress stores a little bit of cookie information to say that you're logged in on a local machine. And what WordPress also does is it uses these salt keys to encrypt or to make a hash out of that particular data before it stores it on your local computer. And it just means that, it's that additional level of security. So if you have a plain WordPress installation and you haven't changed these particular salt keys, then theoretically, if you're logging into a public space like a library or a McDonald's or something like that, a computer, theoretically it means that somebody could go back in there and just use those default keys, and they'll already know the hash of that particular session, and they could steal your session information, which means being able to log into WordPress. So there's a little link. I'll copy that here. Little link here. If you visit that website, then it generates that little code block of random numbers, which you can then just copy and paste into your wp-config.php file. So just that one extra little layer of security for that. Okay, so administrator and editor users. Now it's really easy when you're creating a WordPress website just to give everyone admin access all the time. And you might do that when you're developing websites for clients. Or you might just, have a website where people are doing all these different things and they're coming back to say, oh, I can't do this, I can't do that. You're like, fine, just have admin access. But that's a really bad idea. You want to restrict admin access maybe to 1 or 2 users, preferably a separate login as well. So if, for example, you've got a client, if you're developing a website for a client, give the client an editor access and then create a new username that's got the admin access, so that when they want to do admin stuff, then they have to log in as admin. They know they're in the admin role and they're doing admin stuff. And then just when they're normally interacting with the website, just give them editor or shop manager or the type of access that they need. So really try and restrict the number of users with administrator role, because if you've got admin role, you can do anything you like. You can install a new plugin, you can install a database plugin, get access to the database, you can install a PHP plugin and run PHP code on the server. So it's really dangerous to have multiple admin users for there. Of course, you do need to have at least one admin user, but just have to ask yourself, do you really need any more than that? And what are people actually doing in the website? So things like content creators, editor is more than enough for them, and that will allow them to edit other people's posts and pages for that. If you're running a WooCommerce shop, then things like a shop manager will give you sufficient rights to be able to edit products and change stock levels and things, rather than having to be an admin and then being able to install and remove plugins and things like that. So just have a think about exactly what types of users that you really need on your WordPress website or your client's WordPress website. Okay, so let's get into files and permissions. Now, most websites are going to be hosted on a Linux-based server as opposed to a Windows-based server. So the vast majority of hosting plans are run on Linux machines. So understanding Linux file permissions is going to be fundamental to keeping your website secure. So let's spend a little bit of time looking at this. That's Tux, by the way, and he is the Linux mascot. He's called Tux the penguin. Okay, now this can be a little bit tricky to understand, and you can go back through the slides, and I'll make the slides available after this on the meetup page. So you can go through these again, just so you understand how these works. So each file and directory on Linux, and we're talking about Linux, has 3 user-based permission groups. So that's where the arrow is pointing to. So the first one on the left-hand side is called U, and that's the user who owns the file or directory. Normally that's you. So if you're the web hosting account, that's you when you're logging into the WordPress website, the hosting account. So things like if you go into File Manager, or if you create a secure shell, when you're logged in as you, you are the you part of that. So when you're uploading files with FTP, SFTP or something, this is the permission group that belongs to you, so your user account. Then we've got G. Now G is the group to which the user belongs. So you as the web host owner or login for that, you can be part of that group, but also that group can also contain things like the web server. So the web server might be Apache or Nginx. That can also belong to that G group because it needs access to the files as well to run them and to read them. The last one is O, and that's on the right-hand side, the red one there. O means everyone else who isn't the user who owns the file, who isn't in that group, which contains the user owner and maybe the Apache, the web server that runs it. O is everyone else. And in our context, that basically means visitors that are visiting your website. So people who are not logging in, people who have got no business, with the account. So O is like your public internet access. That's the people who don't have any permissions or be able to update or write stuff. That's everyone who are visiting your website. That's the O. So each file or directory has 3. So we've got 3 groups, but they've also got 3 basic permission types. So the first permission type is R, and that's the user's ability to read the contents of a file. Now, if you think about a web server, it needs to be able to read the PHP files and the CSS files and the JavaScript files in order to push it out to the browser. Then there's W. W is the user's capability to write or modify a file or directory. So that might be to delete stuff, it might be to update stuff, or delete a directory. So you can think about WordPress updates for that, or create a directory as well. And then the last permission type is X. And now X, that's the user's capability to run or execute a file. But with folders, with directories, that also means the ability to be able to open the directory. So with files, X means to run it. So if you have a PHP file, a web server needs to run that PHP file, which will then run through the PHP compiler and produce the HTML to send out. But in the context of Linux permission types, if you've got a directory, if you have not got that execute flag checked for a directory, then you can't actually open the directory for that. So in this graphic, we can see that the user group has a value of 7. Okay, so just at the very top under the green U, we've got the number 7 for that. So let's have a look at how we get to the number 7, because you'll normally find with Linux permissions, you'll hear things like 644, 777, 755, and you're like, what does that mean? So let's have a look at where we get those numbers from. Okay, so in this user group, which is set in number 7, we can see if we look down at these 3 access permissions, the read, the write, and execute, we can see that those have been enabled. So the word enabled, if you run along, so 1 is on and 0 is off. So these attributes are stored in binary, a simple switch on or off for enable and disable. And they're represented in binary from right to left. So each one of these has a switch or on or off, it's enabled or disabled, and that corresponds to a binary value. And in binary, we read from right to left rather than left to right. And they've got their decimal equivalents, which is 1, and then 2, and then 4, and then it goes on to 8, and then 16, 32. But we've only got 3 little components here. So we start at 1, and then the next one is 2 decimal, and then the next one is 4 decimal. So basically what we do is we count those up. So we see here the second bit has a decimal value of 2, and then the third bit has a decimal value of 4. So what we're doing is we look at the results column, and then we add up those values. So we've got a 1, and then a 2, and then a 4, and that equals a total of 7 for that. There we go. So let's just quickly run through the middle column. So the group, the G, is number 5. And we can look down to read, write, and execute. So we've got read is executed. We don't want write for those ones, and we've got execute because it could be this is a directory. So down the result, we've got the read is checked, which is 4 in decimal. We've got the execute checked, which is 1 in decimal. 1 plus 4 equals 5, and that's the same for the other group as well. So that's how you get to those numbers, the 755 or the 644s and all that sort of stuff there. So in general, for WordPress, folders or directories, in general, you give them 755. And what we're doing here, we're saying you, which is you who owns the files. So you have the ability to update the files with FTP or FTP. You can update, you can modify, you can delete, you can create. So we want all 3 switches checked on for those because we want full control for those. So that gives us 7. For the folder, for the G, which includes us, but also includes the web server as well, then we only want to give read and execute. We don't want to particularly give write access to that. And then for O, this is the public people for here, to all the visitors visiting your website. We just basically want to give them read access to the folder, and we want to give them execute access so they can open the folder to go in there as well. So that's 755. In general, WordPress files themselves, that's PHP files, it could be image files, it could be PDF files, things like that. We want to give them the value of 644 from there. We can see number 6, we've got read, we've got write toggle, but we don't have execute. So for files, we don't want to execute files, we don't want to run files. We'll leave the web server to do that. It's got special permissions to do that. So that means that we don't have to execute. So we've basically got read and write switches toggled on, which is 2 plus 4, which is 6. And then for everyone else, we just want them to be able to read the file. We certainly don't want the O group coming in and being able to execute files. So for there, we've only got the read toggled on, and that just means the number 4. So that results in 4 for that. 644. They can be a bit difficult to get your head around, these file permissions, but it's a good idea because sometimes when you're trying to upload stuff to the media manager, you can get this kind of permissions error. It comes up that says could not write file to the directory. And sometimes you'll get the web company will come back to you and say, oh, well, just make the folder 777. And we can see here, given 777 is given everyone, including the O group, which is people visiting your website. It's giving them access to the folder to read it, to write to it, and to open it up as well. And we definitely don't want people writing off to our folder. So that's why, in general, we see for folders, it's 755, because for the O group, we definitely do not want those people writing stuff into our directory. There we go. So if a web host does tell you to make all your folders 777, it's probably a good time to find a different hosting company. So let's just run through some other files and special files in your WordPress installation and have a look at some of the recommended permissions to give those files. So this is probably the three most important system files this one is called the .ht access. So if you're running the Apache web server, which is one of the most popular web servers, you really don't want to be giving people access to read that file. So we want to lock this down. And so I want to change the permissions on this file to 444. And you can do that in Plesk and cPanel with the file manager. So just click on a particular file when you're in File Manager, and you'll be able to change these attributes in one of the settings there. Now, the HT access, it contains things like permalinks. So that's your redirection for your URLs. Error files, it can contain things like directory passwords as well. So we don't want people to have access to that at all. So make sure that that one is locked down. Another important file is php.ini. So this WordPress runs on the language called PHP. And this php.ini kind of tells the PHP server the environment to run in. And we don't want to give hackers access to that, because then they can guess or they can be able to see what type of modules you've got loaded to PHP, the version, and all that sort of thing. So we want to keep that stuff private. So we keep that at file permission 440. The 0 means we don't want anyone outside to be able to access that file at all. So that will secure it. And the WP config file itself, so the main configuration file for WordPress, and that contains things like the WordPress database username and password. It contains your salts and a whole lot of other information as well. And again, we want to lock this one down to 440. So we're basically saying only read access for yourself and for the web server, and then 0. No access for anyone else, because nobody needs to read the wp-config file directly. It's a system file, and only the web server and PHP should be able to read that one for those. Now, for this particular file, in some cases, such as configuring an SEO plugin or a caching or redirection plugin, sometimes they need to be able to access some of these files like .ht access or wp-config, so we can write some session information to that. So sometimes you might get an error from WordPress after you've locked these files down to those permissions. Sometimes you might get an error message say can't update .ht access file or don't have permissions to update wp-config file. So in those cases, you can then go into your cPanel file manager, then change the file permission temporarily back to 644, which is the normal level. Allow the WordPress plugin to then update it, and then go back and lock it again for that to 440 once you're finished. So that's Linux file permissions. A little bit of a learning curve to try and figure out those things, but it's worthwhile understanding and making sure that those files are locked down. Okay. Here's another tip. Malware itself can be hidden in themes. It can be hidden in plugins and other server scripts as well. It's a good practice to have a tool that's going to be able to scan your WordPress server for dodgy scripts, things like that. There's a great tool out there called Securi. I'll pop that in the chat for those people who are looking for that. Now, Securi is a separate service, so it doesn't run on WordPress itself, but they've got what they call a malware scanner. So you can go into the Securi website. You can then put in your URL, and it checks your front-facing website for any malware, and it can detect things like malware in themes, malware in scripts, malware in plugins. For those, anything it's got access to, it can then do that. Now, there is a plugin as well, which is a kind of complementary thing. So there's a cost, there's a paid service. It's $199 US per site per year, and you install a plugin, the Securi plugin, and it runs in the background. And it can scan for malware more effectively. And the good thing about paying that money is that if it does find any malware, then the security will actually clean it up for free for those. You don't have to worry about it. They'll come into the web server and they'll fix it all for free for you. But it can do things as well, like it can check your blacklists as well to see if your IP address to your web server is blacklisted. And then it can do things like notifications to your text message or email or your Twitter or Slack address as well, if it finds things like that. But definitely worthwhile having a tool like Security or WordFence, scanning files, scanning your server files to make sure that nothing dodgy is in there. Of course, you need to update regularly. So we're talking about WordPress core, we're talking about WordPress themes, I'm talking about WordPress plugins. So make sure you update those things regularly. And by regularly, I kind of mean at least kind of weekly. So don't leave it too long in between your updates. It's okay if you're running just a single website to go in like once a week and just run update. But it's probably more effective if you're using a tool for that. Certainly if you've got lots and lots of different client websites that you're looking after. Now, here's a service that I use. It's called Managed WP. I've used it for many, many years. So the free version is okay. And it allows you to basically, you log into the Managed WP. It's got a dashboard. You can basically add all your WordPress websites. There's a worker plugin that you add to each website, which connects securely through to the dashboard. And it basically tells you all the WordPress websites, all the plugins, all the core, all the theme updates. And it also does things like the database. It can do performance checks on database. It can also look at like spam comments that are coming through and a few other things for that as well. This is the main tool that I use to manage all these WordPress client websites. And I also use it for staging. So for all of my client websites, I've got a staging site that I host elsewhere. And so what I'll do is you can assign labels to different websites. So I've got labels for production, which is live websites. I've got labels for staging. I've got labels for development. So I can go to staging, which is a copy of the live website, and then just apply all the updates, see if there's any problems. If there's no problems, then I can just apply that same update to the live production system as well. You can also
update. Sorry, does it update immediately once the new plugin or is available? Because we found we don't update immediately because we found lots of times news will come out, oh, there's something wrong, so we'll have to get a patch to fix it up. So we allow 2 or 3 days.
Yeah, and that's a great point, John. I generally don't update auto update things, especially for client websites. I might auto update some really kind of minor plugins that maybe only do like 1 or 2 specific things in the background. But in general, I keep all my plugins just like a manual update. And I'm the same as you. I will have a look and see what's been updated. If it's just a minor point release, like 1.1.x, then I'll probably do an update. If it's like a 1.1 update, then I'll probably have a look through the release notes and to see what's there. If it's a major update, so that's the first one. So it's going from version 4 to version 5. That's when we will take that aside, have a look at the staging server, update that, and just check for any versions for those. But in general, for like the small point releases, they don't usually break the websites, but certainly for the larger ones, yep. If it's a major point release, I usually don't update that straight away. As you say, I'll wait for a few days just to make sure there's no issues with that. But that's a good point, John. Yeah. So WordPress core automatically out of the box updates for point releases. So we're just talking about that with John. So that's like, for example, 5.1.2. If it's the .2 at the very end, WordPress kind of automatically updates for those. And you can add a little line in your wp config.php file, and you can define the WP auto update core to be true. And what that will do is that will update your WordPress core automatically. You might not want to do that for point releases. You might want to leave it manual, as John and I have described. But if you do want to auto update it, then you can set the last version to true. And that just updates those minor point releases. You can set it to false as well. So all updates are disabled. So if you really don't want WordPress to update automatically, then you can set for false. And then you can set it to minor as well, if you just want those minor updates to be done. So you've got a little bit of control as to how you want WordPress core to update automatically. But just bear in mind as well that sometimes sometimes if there's like a severe issue with WordPress, then Automatic can kind of push out an update, and they've got a little bit in their code that allows them to push out point releases themselves. So they can actually override your setting there if they think it's like a really important bug patch, and they can push that out to your systems. I'll update WordPress. So for plugins, just to update them, so you can update them. I can set them to auto update now as of a few versions back. So if you go into your WordPress admin dashboard and go into the plugins area, you can now see a column on the right-hand side for automatic updates. So by default, it's set to disable, but you can click on enable auto update if you think there's a plugin that's safe enough to auto update all the time. And then that means that whenever there's a release for that new version, then WordPress is just going to auto update that for you. And that's quite handy for like small plugins that, you know, don't do an awful lot. So sometimes you can get plugins that maybe just add like one option into the dashboard area, and they're pretty safe to update. But things like WooCommerce, all these like big plugins, I probably would not recommend choosing auto update for that. You really want to babysit those type of updates and make sure that goes through okay. For themes as well, you can auto update themes in exactly the same way. So again, if you go into your WordPress admin dashboard and go into appearance and then the themes, you can click on the information about the themes, and in the right hand side underneath the theme title, then you've got an enable auto update as well for that. Now in general, themes are usually safe to update unless they're doing like a major rewrite. So if you've had like a newsletter and email come out to say, oh, you were developing, you know, version 10 of GeneratePress, it's going to be completely fabulous, it's going to have all these new features, then I generally would not turn on auto updates for those. But in general, if you've got a theme, it should be stable enough just to auto update that. Otherwise, you know, unless they're doing like a big major update. Let's see. So you can also change the theme and plugins updates as well. The same thing here. So this is, we're going to a different file called the functions.php file, and that lives in your theme or your child theme. And you can actually determine programmatically the way that you want plugins and themes to update as well. So there's a little bit more information about that, and I'll paste that link there. So if you're like a developer and you want to be able to programmatically update things, then that's probably the best option for you at the moment. Okay, so we're talking about themes and plugins, and I know a lot of these themes and plugins can sometimes cost a lot of money, especially things like WooCommerce. So WooCommerce, the core product is free, but then, you know, all your add-on plugins like your gateways or your memberships or your subscriptions, all those cost quite a bit of money, maybe like $200-300 US, and it all kind of adds up. So it's tempting to try and find a free version of a premium file. But the reason you shouldn't do that is that most of these kind of free premium files offerings, they're going to be splattered with malware in there as well. So please don't kind of skip this premium part. Don't try and find a free version of premium file. It's usually right picking for the hackers to install malware in there. And if you install that just one time, then the malware is going to spread, and it's really difficult to recover from that. So always try and download themes and plugins from the original source, the theme developer, or from the WordPress.org repositories for those. Definitely avoid things like torrents. I know torrents are probably not as popular as they were when we first started doing the security talk, but still people use it. So definitely don't download premium themes and files from torrents, because they are guaranteed to be riddled with malware. There's a little link in there as well, and again I'll post all these links afterwards. But there's a good little blog on WPMU Dev, and they talk about getting free premium files. And I think in their example, they try and search for a free premium file, and I think 8 out of the first 10 search results that come back with Google, they analyze, and 8 out of the 10 had malware in those as well. So try and stick with buying premium files, or stick to the WordPress.org repository. So we're talking about malware, but what does that malware actually mean? So some of the malware is hidden. It's hidden behind a function. And so you think of malware as maybe a script that runs in PHP that maybe looks at your configuration files, and then might send an email back to the hacker. so they can then get access to your database and then go from there. And so a lot of these scripts, they try and avoid being scanned by your firewalls. And they do this by hiding the code. And one quick way of hiding the code is to use something called base64. Now, base64 is a function that comes with PHP, and it basically encodes plain text into a binary format that you can't read. So if you were looking at a particular function, somebody could write a function that could maybe delete everything on your web server, they could use that base64 to run that function code and encode it into like a string of garbled numbers. If a scanner was looking through, it wouldn't be able to pick up on it because they wouldn't be able to understand what's there. And then there's another function called base64 decode, which then takes that scrambled data and then unravels it into that function. So that's a quick way for hackers, a quick and easy way for hackers to hide malware in themes and things like that. It's used legitimately as well. So just because you see base64, it doesn't automatically mean that there's malware in your script, but certainly would be a red flag for me to go and check what is going on there. So not all base64 functions are evil. WordPress does use it extensively through the core. So it's kind of legitimately used for transmitting things like images up and down the web. That's what it's basically used for. But if you do come across something in your theme and you're not quite too sure, there is a nice little online tool. It's called base64decode.org. And you can copy that bit of information that's in that kind of garbled information. You can copy that into there. And it'll decode it, and you can maybe see what is there. And if it's legit, if it's just an image, then once you decode it, all you'll see is an image, and that's fine. But sometimes if you've got malware and you decode that garbled string, and then you probably see like a set of functions, like JavaScript functions and PHP functions, and that's not a good thing to be hiding. You really want to be, the theme authors and plugin authors should be transparent as to what sort of stuff is in their themes and plugins. So there's another link there. I don't have a link on here, but there's another link called Theme Check. So you can run that as well. So if you don't understand any of this, then you want to check your theme to make sure that it's okay. And then you can download this plugin. It's from the WordPress.org repository. It's called Theme Check. And this is the plugin that the WordPress theme people, like the repo people, this is what they use to run new theme submissions through. So what it does, it checks to make sure that the theme is using proper stuff. It checks for malware as well. So anything that's kind of off or issue with the theme, this plugin will highlight it. So if you're not sure about your WordPress theme, if you've downloaded a free version of a premium file and you don't really know what's going on, or you maybe suspect that something's in there, but you're not quite sure, then use this Theme Check plugin, and it will run your current theme through that and just highlight any issues from there. So it's a good little check plugin, that one. Another thing with security is make sure that your plugins are all up to date. And what I mean by that is make sure that they're being maintained. So at the bottom here, you can see if you go into the WordPress.org repository, if you go into the plugin page for that, on the right-hand side, you'll see things like this. You'll see version number, you'll see last updated, and active installations as well. So in general, if a lot of people are using it, then, more often, it's not riddled with bugs. But things like, the last updated is a good call. If you have a look at that, if that's over 2 years old, I think the WordPress.org repository flags it to say, it's not been updated in 2 years. And it's probably not a good idea installing old plugins like that. And because they're not being actively maintained, they're not being actively updated, it could be, it might not have malware in there, but it could have like old bugs. So things like, a PHP bug or just some other kind of type of bug, and it's just not being fixed because nobody's looking after it, nobody's maintaining it. So make sure that the plugin is being maintained, and if it's being maintained, then that means that there's less security issues that they're going to be with it. And again, you can find that information on the WordPress.org plugins repository. Another good thing as well is to look at is the support part of the plugin page. So the support is going to tell you the number of issues that resolved in the last 2 months. If that is 0, then that means that the plugin author is not really responding to any issues that people are calling up with the plugin. So that could be another red flag not to use that particular plugin if support's not being answered regularly for that. SSL certificates. So SSL certificates, I get asked this quite frequently. Some people don't really understand what the SSL certificate does. So SSL certificates, they don't secure your website from being hacked. And some people in the past have thought that if they purchase an SSL certificate, that it means that nobody can hack the website. That's not true. So SSL certificates, they encrypt the data that's being transmitted between the computer, your computer and the web server. So that's all it does. It's a good thing to have because that data is encrypted and it means that hackers can't snoop that data. So it's more difficult to grab out things like passwords. But ultimately, SSL certificates, it doesn't secure your website from being hacked. It's just another kind of tool under your belt to harden your WordPress security. Just a quick thing about SSL certificates is that you should never be paying for one. So for quite a few years ago, now maybe about 5 or 6 years ago, a company was created called let'sencrypt.org, and they basically offer a free SSL certificate to everyone or to anyone. Now, most web hosting companies, most of them now use this particular system. They integrate it within their systems. But if they've got a hosting company and they're asking you to buy an SSL certificate, then that should be a red flag. You really should never, ever have to buy an SSL certificate ever again. And if your company is asking you to buy one specifically just for your web host, then it might be time to move on to another web hosting company. Saying that, once you've got your SSL certificate, you want to use it as much as possible. So you can do things like if you go into your WP -config.php file, and you can add these two little lines on here. So we're basically saying we want to force the SSL dashboard, the admin dashboard, to use HTTPS. So if someone tries to log into your WordPress website using HTTP, excuse me, and then the WP login or login, then if you have this line in your configuration file, then it'll then transfer that or move that over to HTTPS. So nobody can try and log in just using HTTP. It'll automatically switch over to HTTPS. And similarly as well for the dashboard, so the SL admin, that means that when someone's logged into your dashboard, that everything that you do in the dashboard uses HTTPS. So if someone has logged in using HTTPS, and that's the last one there, force SSL login, then I guess they could go up to the top and they could type in a dashboard request using HTTP. So you want to force that to HTTPS, and that's what the first line does there as well. So these two lines together just make sure that everything you do from your WordPress login and in your dashboard, if you've got an SSL certificate, make sure it does everything using HTTPS, which means all the data is encrypted and it's as secure as it can be. Software firewalls. So using something like a software firewall, they're called web application firewalls or WAFs. It's basically a security plugin, and it gives lots of additional levels of security. Now, the one that I use is called WordFence. It's one that I recommend to everyone, but there are a couple of other good ones. So WordFence, you can get here. I'll copy that in the link. And then there's one called Security that I mentioned before. Again, that's a paid plugin. They do have a free version, but it doesn't really do that much. But if you want the full capability, then pay for that one. And then there's the third one that people recommend is the Ithemes security scanner. So any of these three is a good choice. I run WordFence mostly on the free version, and that does enough for me. Some of my clients run the paid version of WordFence, and that gives them access to things like daily updates for the plugin threat analysis, and also things like there's an add-on that you get with the paid version of WordFence that allows you to restrict countries from accessing your WordPress website. So that's quite handy. I've got a few clients that only sell membership to a particular region because that's the region they support. So they basically ban any other countries from that in there. So what does it do? Well, it scans these WAFs. They scan for things like malware. They can scan for things like differences in the core plugin and theme files from the repository, which means that if you've got a plugin installed, then it goes and checks the WordPress.org plugin files with the one that's installed on your local machine. And if there's any differences, it highlights it up to you. So that's quite handy to have. New updates as well. So it can tell you if there's a new update for plugins or themes or files. But WordFence, it comes with lots of little tools like a login limiter, so that can stop brute force attacks. So if you've got a script that's trying to guess usernames and passwords, then you can then store that IP, or WordFence will store the IP and then block that particular access for however long you want to block it, for 10 minutes, 20 minutes, or whatever. It's got the 4 strong passwords, which I talked about before, but it also scans for things like Trojans. It scans for SQL injections, so people trying to put stuff into your database server through forms. DNS changes as well, so something's kind of changing your DNS file, and they can flag things like that. You can also scan files that are outside the WordPress folder. So maybe you've got some other scripts, or maybe like another website in there. You can also scan those files that are outside the WordPress folder as well, and lots of other things as well. So these 3 choices, WordFence, Secure, Ithemes, Security, either of them are really, really good. My preference is WordFence, but I would also say, I'd always tell people to have at least one of those installed on your WordPress installation. Don't just rely on your hosting company to do all that stuff for you. Now, this is a new type of malware threat, or newish type of malware threat. And it's something that WordFence does look for, and it's called a cryptocurrency miner. So when you unfortunately do get some malware in your theme or a plugin file, this is probably one of the more common ones that's popping up at the moment. And what this does is it installs a JavaScript cryptocurrency miner on your website. And every time somebody visits a website, then this little crypto miner starts running, and it basically uses that person's PC power, computing power, to try and mine some cryptocurrency. So I had a client once who said he was getting complaints from lots of his customers that their website was running really, really slow for those. I had a look into it and found that they had some malware in their theme. And what was happening when clients were visiting their store, it was a WooCommerce store, it was going, the visitors' website was going really, really, really slow. And what was happening was this JavaScript miner was spinning up the visitor's computer CPU and basically trying to mine Bitcoins or whatever coin it was. It's mostly CoinHive for that. So, and all that kind of goes back to whatever the hackers are into the hacker's bank account. And so how can you tell if you're under threat for this particular instance? Well, you can run one of these security plugins like WordFence, and it'll try and find the code. But a quick sign that's happening is that you'll hear your fan spin up to 100%. So most of the times when you're running your laptop or your computer, you're not going to hear the fans because they're all kind of balanced nicely for being quiet. But when you do hear your fans spin up, you can hear it revving up. Then that could be a sign that your WordPress theme has like a cryptocurrency miner or plugin has that in there. So definitely have a look out for that. It's becoming kind of a more popular malware type of incursion. A quick talk on brute force login attempts. So what this is a brute force attack. It's when people usually scripts repeatedly try and guess a username and a password combinations. So you definitely want to block those type of IP addresses after X number of unsuccessful login attempts within a particular period of time. Now, if you don't want to run a full WordFence security firewall like WordFence, then at least you should be using this plugin here, which is called Limit Login Attempts Reloaded. And that does exactly the same as the option in WordFence. It detects that people are trying to brute force attack or guess usernames and passwords, and it basically just blocks the IP, and you can set the number of time limit for it being blocked to like 10 or 20 minutes for that until they're able to reconnect again. So again, if you not want to use a full-blown web application firewall like WordFence, if you don't want that bloat, then at the very least kind of install this little plugin here, and that's going to stop your brute force login attempts. Because not only that might eventually be successful and try and guess your password, not only might that happen, but when another script is repeatedly hammering your web server to try and guess, then it's slowing down your web server as well. So if you're getting lots of requests for a login then your web server's having to respond to that, and that's going to slow down that website, which means it's going to be slow for everyone, and it could affect your SEO scores as well. So always a good to at least have this this little plugin here, if not the full WordFence firewall. Another little thing that you can do just to increase security a little bit is WordPress out of the box, the WordPress core by default. If you are on your login page, if you have the right username but guess the wrong password, then this helpful little error message pops up to say the password you entered for the username is incorrect. And that basically is telling everyone else that that username is correct, but the password is wrong. And that's really, really bad for security because, again, you know, for default WordPress installations, you've only got username, you've only got a password combination. And if someone can guess the right username and get that confirmed, then that's 50% of your security down the toilet. So to remove that little dialog box coming up, then all you need to do is put this one line of code in your functions.php file. So that's your themes functions.php file. It's just like a filter. So add underscore filter, login underscore errors, and we're returning null. So you can copy and paste that from the slide. I'll give you access to the slides afterwards. Copy that into your functions.php file, and then that little error will just, that error file message will just disappear. Okay, an hour and a half. That's long going. Remember I said I cut this in half? Imagine what the actual security talk was like. We're getting very close to the end. So backups. There is no excuse not to back up your entire website frequently. So you can back up in real time, you can back up in hourly, daily, or weekly, depending on your needs. But there's so many backup plugins out there nowadays that really there's no excuse not to back up your website. But I unfortunately still come across websites that have no backup system in place at all. So here's some links in the chat for those. So there's some good methods out there. If you don't have like a storage system out there, that you can always buy a subscription to something. So there's WordPress, there's Backup Buddy. So those are two really, really popular backup services. They're paid. So you pay something like $3 or $4 a month, and they will back up your website daily onto the systems. You can pay more for more frequent backups for those. If you have already have some cloud space, like Amazon S3 or Backblaze, you can use that for your backup space. And there's plugins out there to back up to Amazon S3. You can also do things like backup to Dropbox. So there's a plugin there called WordPress Backup to Dropbox. And you can then select whatever Dropbox account you have, and it just creates a daily backup within your Dropbox for that. John's mentioned Updraft Plus. Yep, so that's another popular, like Backup Buddy, like WordPress. Updraft Plus is a popular backup plugin. But look, you know, if you don't want to pay for storage, if you don't want to pay for a service, you can still back up your website, and that's the first option up there, and it's called backup to email, Updraft Plus for that. So you don't have to pay for the pro version Updraft Plus, but if you download the free version, and it's got an option to email you a zip file of your contents and email you the database. So at the very least, you've got a copy somewhere of the website if it goes down. So lots of different options there for how to back up your website. But you should always, always, always have a backup of your site and not rely on your web host being able to back that system up. Last one, I promise, last one, and it is multi-factor authentication. Now, I highly, highly recommend using that on all your personal websites. I always urge my clients to use multi-factor authentication. Sometimes it doesn't work out because, you know, sometimes their user base, you know, doesn't fully understand or gets confused about multi-factor authentication. But basically what it is it's using a third code for your login. So WordPress out of the box, you have your username and you have your password. But installing something like multi-factor, or sometimes it's called two-factor authentication, allows you to have some other code. Now, most often that's generated using an app on your phone. Everyone's always got your phone handy. So it's something that the hackers don't have access to or should not have access to, that you can carry around. So anywhere you are, you can log in. So you can generate a code from here. And then you enter that code. So on the image on the left-hand side is the Google Authenticator that's on the phone. So it spins round, you've got 60 seconds, and then the code refreshes to something else. So when you're logging, you put in your username, you type in your password, you then go to your phone, spin up this authenticator, and then type in that 6-digit code. And that's your third security access into WordPress. Now, if you've got this installed, it is really, really difficult for hackers to get in there because they don't have that code with them. So this can also stop brute force because whatever brute force attempts try using the password, it's not going to have this other authentication ID as well. Now, what I use is I use WordFence and the WordFence free version. It's got in the security section, you can turn on two-factor authentication. For that, you go through a little bit of a process. So it'll show you a QR code. So you'll then go into your Google Authenticator. You then take a picture of the QR code. It'll give you a code on your phone that you then type in to WordFence. Once that's done, then your account is synchronized and is ready to use for Google Authenticator. And you can also force other people. So you can force all admins on your website to use this two-factor authentication as well. So I really do highly recommend, if there's one thing you take away from this whole talk, it's to use 2FA on all your own client websites you're logging in, all your own websites that you manage for yourself. And definitely think about having a conversation with clients and get them to use this two-factor authentication as well, because it's really, really going to help. This one thing is really going to help secure your WordPress website. Okay, guys, we've gotten to the end. I know it's taken a long, long time, and this is me with slides I've removed from the normal security talk. So here's my kind of summary of what we've covered today. So TLDR, too long, didn't read. So if there's some things that you really want to take away today, these are the things. So use complex usernames and passwords. And we looked at a couple of ways to do that. We looked at 16-digit random characters, but we also looked at choosing 4 random words that were like kind of put together, and that's as secure as doing the 16-digit random numbers. Check your file permissions and make sure they have minimum access. It's useful just to even go into cPanel in Plesk, go into the file manager in cPanel or Plesk, and just kind of have a look at your directory structure, have a look at your WP contents, have a look at your uploads folder, just make sure they're not set to 777, because that means that you're allowing everyone out there in the universe to come and write to your folders. Make sure you do updates for your WordPress core, your themes and plugins often and regularly. And so make it part of your schedule to do, even if it's only once a month. Book it into your calendar to make sure that you're doing it like on the first of the month or the end of the month. Go into your dashboard, update everything, make sure it's all good. I would highly recommend using a security firewall and set that to scan regularly. Most of them, even the free versions, will scan daily. If you get a pro version, you can scan more. Just be careful though when you're scanning things, because it does take some resource load on the web server. So you want to set those scans to early in the morning or whenever your website's got its low traffic. Consider using two-factor authentication for all your WordPress websites, because that's going to give you probably the best security advantage over everything, particularly from a login point of view. When you're choosing themes and plugins, make sure you're choosing reputable theme providers. And if you don't know who reputable theme providers are, then we're talking about the WordPress.org repositories or places like ThemeForest or Code Canyon. If you don't know who they are, you can always chat to other people, chat to other WordPress users, ask them where they get their plugins from. We've also got a Slack channel as well. You can ask in there, and you can say, I found this theme on this particular website. Then is that kind of safe? And someone will come back to say yes or no. Don't do it from there. So make sure you're using reputable theme providers and plugin providers. Uninstall unused code. So we're talking about themes and plugins. So if you're not using something, don't leave it sitting there, just kind of festering away. Make sure you actually kind of delete it, because it's easy to reinstall it. There's kind of no excuse for leaving things just kind of, deactivated. Get rid of all that, because you never know, some of that code could have vulnerabilities, and if the directories are not protected properly, then people could run the PHP scripts in there. So if you're not using a theme, if you're not using a plugin, uninstall it, and then you can always reinstall it later on. And then, my top tip is to lock all doors, windows, and switch off the internet. That's going to be the best way to protect your WordPress website. Switch off the web server so that nobody can get at it. But of course, that's useless, because then nobody can visit your website. Brett says, Will, about 3 years ago, I saw the full version of this talk live. Yeah, you probably fell asleep. The security world is constantly growing. Thank you for helping us to keep up. You are more than welcome. I'm actually glad that I've been able to give this, because I've been able to put in that kind of little twist on it, get rid of the irrelevant stuff, bring it back up to date. It may well grow to a 3-part presentation in the future. It might do. It might do, because there's more advanced stuff that I could talk about. So that's my introduction to WordPress security, basics, core, if you want to say. Again, there's more advanced stuff I could put in. I might hold another one later on next year about advanced WordPress security. But if you cover yourself with all these particular aspects, then your WordPress website is going to be more secure than most people, because a lot of people just install WordPress, they don't do these tips, and then, you know, end of the day, they end up getting hacked, mostly because they've not updated all their plugins or themes for those. So yeah, that's it. My mouth is pretty dry. That's been pretty long.
I got 2 questions, if you don't mind.
Go for it.
Number one, once you stop using Zoom and go back to live presentations or whatever, is it going to be recorded? Because coming from Newcastle or Keyes Beach is a hell of a long way to Sydney.
It is. Yeah, thanks, John.
And number 2, so you don't forget, where do you get all your images? Because they are always really, really good in every presentation I ever saw, and they suit. Okay,
so where do I get my images from? Pixels is one of them.
Oh yeah.
But I actually pay for stock photos. So I've got a lifetime deal for a website called Stock Photo Secrets. And it gives me 100 images or like 200 images per year. And I lock that in. So yeah, I flip between Pixels or Pixabay. And then if I don't find anything that's free with those, then I kind of go to the stock one. So it's called Stock Photo Secrets. And they've got really, really good photos, nice and crisp, really high res as well. So yes, that's where I get my images from. Regarding meetups, live meetups, you know, the world has changed with COVID, and there's kind of people are comfortable about viewing stuff online now, and it also gives people the ability to kind of log in and watch, where they maybe couldn't do that before. So John, with yourself traveling, it's a long way to travel just for like, you know, an hour or a couple hours meetup. So having the convenience of doing like a live stream or recording, it's something that we're talking to our venue about. Yes, I think they do have the capability of doing like live streaming and recording, but generally, if we do go back to like a local meetup model, and then at the very least, I'm going to have my camera there, and we're either going to live stream using my technology or live stream using the venue's technology, or the very kind of basic, we'll record the video and then upload that to the YouTube so people can watch it afterwards. So yes, videos are going to be here to stay. So
that's great news. Thank you.
No worries. If anyone else got any other questions, you can just, you know, ask me now or drop that in the chat if you don't want to get on camera. Some people don't like to get on camera. That's okay. I was shy once too.
Well, I think I'm going to go and turn the lights on and have some dinner. Thank you very much. You've done an absolutely brilliant job. Thank you.
You are welcome. So I'm just going to share my screen. I've got a few exit slides for you guys. So there's a link to WPSaustralia.org. I'll just copy that into the chat. So if you're looking for other meetups across Australia, if you visit WPSaustralia.org, click on the Find Meetup. It'll tell you all the meetups that are happening, virtual or physical, across Australia. And there's also a link to join us on Slack. If you don't know what Slack is, that's a kind of little snapshot off there. So there's lots of different channels or rooms that you can go into for things like plugins or security or general tips or coding or support. Things like that. You can go in there and just kind of ask people, and people kind of generally hang around in those particular groups. It's a really welcoming group. People answer your questions that you ask, or you can answer other people's questions. But generally, it's just a good place to hang out and just get to know other people in the WordPress community. And no question is stupid. There's all different levels. There's people who are brand new to WordPress and ask questions. There's people who have been coding for 5 or 6 years that are still like me asking questions. How do you do this? For those, and it's a great place to get to know people, get to share in the community, ask questions, and just help out as well. So I'd highly recommend visiting that and joining there. And that's me as well. So you can connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm mostly on LinkedIn these days. I'm under Developer Will. Well, that's probably going to change a little bit. And I'm on Instagram under willbrown_EU and Twitter willbrown_EU. You can probably guess what I'm going to change my LinkedIn to at some point. But next month, so for the big monthly meetup, I'm going to say next month, actually this month, because it's delayed. So the end of November, it's the last Monday. I can't remember the exact date. I'll have a quick look at my computer. It is the 29th. So 29th at 6 p.m. I'm going to be talking about 8 low-cost ways to drive traffic to your website. Because I get asked all the time from people, how do I get more visitors? How do I get more traffic to my website? So I'm going to be covering 8 really, really easy, low-cost ways to drive more traffic to your website next month. So that's it, guys. Thank you very much for spending a heap of time with me tonight in front of the computer. I do recommend that you switch off and go and kind of do something else that's not looking at a computer. And I'll make these slides available on the meetup page and underneath the video as well on social media. So you can get all those links that I mentioned. I'll bundle all those up. So give me a little bit of time, maybe later on tonight, and I'll post that for you. Otherwise, thank you so much for joining me. Thanks for the questions as well. See you guys during my weekly WP quickies, which I do every Thursday at 1 p.m. Sydney time. Otherwise, I'll see you next month. So thank you, guys.